Hey, hi there everyone, Grandma Diane here. It's time for Grandma Diane's story time. And today's story, as I promised you yesterday, is called A Bad Case of Stripes. It's written by David Shannon and it's published by Scholastic. A Bad Case of Stripes. I wonder what in the world stripes is, don't you? Look at this picture. I think she has a lot of clothes in her closet, this lovely little girl. And here we go with our story. Camilla Cream loved lima beans, but she never ate them. All of her friends hated lima beans, and she wanted to fit in. Camilla was always worried about what other people thought of her. Today she was fretting even more than usual. It was the first day of school, and she couldn't decide what to wear. There were so many people to impress. She tried on 42 outfits, but none seemed quite right. She put on a pretty red dress in the mirror. Then she screamed. Oh my goodness, I guess I would scream too. Her mother ran into the room and she screamed too. Oh my heavens, she cried. You are completely covered with stripes. This was certainly true. Camilla was stripped from head to toe. She looked like a rainbow. Mrs. Cream felt Camilla's forehead. Do you feel all right? She asked. I feel fine, Camilla answered, but just look at me. You get back in bed this instant, her mother ordered. You're not going to school today. Camilla was relieved. She didn't want to miss the first day of school, but she was afraid of what the other kids would say, and she had no idea what to wear with those crazy stripes. Even her fingers are striped. Look at that. My goodness. That afternoon, Dr. Brumble came to examine Camilla. Most extraordinary, he exclaimed. I've never seen anything like it. Are you having any coughing, sneezing, runny nose, aches, pains, chills, hot flashes, dizziness, drowsiness, shortness of breath, or uncomfortable twitching? No, Camilla told him. I feel fine. Well then, Dr. Bumble said, turning to Mrs. Cream, I don't see any reason why she couldn't go to school tomorrow. Here's some ointment that would help clear up those stripes in a few days. If it doesn't, you know where to reach me. And off he went. Look at even her tongue is striped. Oh, the poor dear. Oh my, here she is at school. Look at all the kids looking at her. What are they doing with their hand over their heart, do you suppose? You're right. They're saying the Pledge of Allegiance. The next day was a disaster. Everyone at school laughed at Camilla. They called her Camilla Crayon and Night of the Living Lollipop. She tried her best to act as if everything were normal, but when the class said the Pledge of Allegiance, her stripes turned red, white, and blue, and she broke out in stars. Oh my, poor thing. The other kids thought this was great. One yelled out, let's see some purple polka dots. Sure enough, Camilla turned all purple polka dotty. Someone else shouted, checkerboard, and a pattern of squares covered her skin. Soon everyone was calling out different shapes and colors, and poor Camilla was changing faster than you can change channels on TV. Poor thing. That night, Mr. Harms, the school principal, called. I'm sorry, Mrs. Cream, he said. I'm going to have to ask you to keep Camilla home from school. She's just too much of a distraction, and I've been getting calls from the other parents. They're afraid those stripes may be contagious. Camilla was so embarrassed. She couldn't believe that 2 days ago everyone liked her. Now nobody wanted to be in the same room with her. Her father tried to make her feel better. Is there anything I can get you, sweetheart? He asked. Her No, thank you, sighed Camellia. What she really wanted was a nice plate of lima beans, but she had been laughed at enough for one day. Oh my goodness, look at all the doctors here now. Oh boy. Poking and prodding. Poor girl. Well, yes, I see, Dr. Bumble mumbled when Mr. Cream phoned the next day. I think I'd better bring in the specialist. We'll be right over. And about an hour later, Dr. arrived with 4 people in long white coats. He introduced them to the Creams. This is Dr. Crop, Dr. Sponge, Dr. Cricket, and Dr. Young. Then the specialist went to work on Camellia. They squeezed and jabbed, tapped, and tested. It was very uncomfortable. Well, it's not the mumps, concluded Dr. Crop. Or the measles, said Dr. Sponge. Definitely not chicken pox, put in Dr. Cricket. Or sunburn, said Dr. Young. Try these, said the specialist. They each handed her a bottle filled with different colored pills. Take one of each before bed, said Dr. Crop. Then they filed out of the room, out of the front door, followed by Dr. Bumble. I think I'm Grandma Bumble today. That night, Camellia took her medicine. It was awful. When she woke up the next morning, she did feel different, but when she got dressed, her clothes didn't fit right. She looked in the mirror, and there, staring back at her, was a giant, multicolored pill with her face on it. Oh, my goodness. That would be awful. Dr. Bumble rushed over as soon as Mrs. Cream called, but this time, instead of the specialists, he brought the experts. Dr. Gord and Dr. Mellon were the finest scientific minds in the land. Once again, Camellia was poked and prodded, looked at and listened to. The experts wrote down lots of numbers, then they huddled together and whispered. Dr. Gord finally spoke. It might be a virus, he announced with authority. Suddenly, fuzzy little virus balls appeared all over Camellia. Or possibly some form of bacteria, said Mr. Mellon. Out popped squiggly little bacteria tails. Or it could be a fungus, added Dr. Gord. Instantly, Camellia was covered with different colored fungus blotches. The experts looked at Camellia, then at each other. We need to go over these numbers again back at the lab, Dr. Gord explained. We'll call you when we know something. But the experts didn't have a clue, much less a cure. Poor Camellia. Oh, boy. Look who's here. Media. Oh, wow. By now, the TV news had found out about Camellia. Reporters from every channel were outside her house telling the story of the bizarre case of the incredible changing kid. Soon a huge crowd was camped out on the front lawn. I guess, look at them knocking at the door. Got cameras set up, news vans, and look at poor Camellia. Oh my goodness sakes, she even has a tail. The Creams were swamped with all kinds of remedies, from psychologists, allergists, herbalists, nutritionists, psychics, an old medicine man, a guru, and even a veterinarian. Each so-called cure only added to poor Camelia's strange appearance until it was hard to even recognize her. She sprouted roots and berries and crystals and feathers and a long furry tail. It worked. Oh my goodness. Girl, huh? And look at her room. Her room has even changed. Wow. Strange happenings. One day, a woman who called herself an environmental therapist claimed she could cure Camellia. Close your eyes, she said. Breathe deeply and become one with your room. I wish you hadn't said that, Camellia groaned. Slowly, she started to melt into the walls of her room. Her bed became her mouth. Her nose was a dresser. 2 paintings were her eyes. The therapist screamed and ran from the house. What are we going to do? Cried Mrs. Cream. It's just getting worse and worse. And she began to sob. Oh, I guess I'd be sobbing too. At that moment, Mr. Cream heard a quiet little knock at the front door. He opened it, and there stood an old woman who was just as plump and as sweet as a strawberry. She's even got red polka dot clothes on. Excuse me, she said brightly. I think I can help. Oh my goodness, look at that poor Camellia. She went into Camelia's room and looked around. My goodness, she said with a shake of her head. What we have here is a bad case of stripes, one of the worst I've ever seen. She pulled out a container of small green beans from her bag. Here, she said, these might do the trick. Are those magic beans? Asked Mrs. Cream. Oh, my, no, replied the kind old woman. There's no such thing. These are just plain old lima beans. I'll bet you'd like some, wouldn't you? She asked Camellia. Camellia wanted a big, helping, heaping plate full of lima beans more than just about anything, but she was still afraid to admit it. Yuck, she said. No one likes lima beans, especially me. Oh, dear, the old woman said sadly. I guess I was wrong about you. She put the beans back in her bag and started toward the door. Camellia watched the old woman walk away. Those beans would taste so good, and being laughed at eating them was nothing compared to what she'd been going through. She finally couldn't stand it. Wait, she cried. The truth is, I really love lima beans. I thought so, the old woman said with a smile. She took a handful of beans and popped them into Camelia's mouth. Said Camellia. Oh, my goodness sakes. Oh, look at that. Suddenly, the branches, feathers, and squiggly tails began to disappear. Then the whole room swirled around. When it stopped, there stood Camellia. Everything was back to normal. I'm cured, she shouted. Yes, said the old woman. I knew the real you was in there somewhere. She patted Camellia on the head. Then she went outside and vanished into the crowd. Look at that. Real her, the real Camellia is back. Afterward, Camellia wasn't quite the same. Some of the kids at school said she was weird, but, she didn't care a bit. She ate all the lima beans she wanted, and she never even... Let me try that out again. She ate all the lima beans she wanted, and she never had even a touch of stripes again. Look at her bow and her hair. Stripes, though, isn't it? She looks pretty happy. And the stripes went away when she told the, what? Truth. That's right. When she told the truth about what she really liked and what she didn't like. And she didn't care what the others thought of her. As long as she was happy, that's all that mattered for her. The end. And there's the stripes at the back of the book. So there we have it, people. A bad case of the stripes. And it was cured by telling the truth about what she really felt. And it happened to be she really loved those lima beans. Wonderful. That's a fun story to read. Thank you, David Shannon, for your wonderful story. Tomorrow, we're kind of changing pace again. Tomorrow, we're going Up North at the Cabin by Marcia Wilson Chall. And I heard from Marcia Wilson Chall this morning, and she was very appreciative of me reading her story. And she even wants to comment on my reading afterwards. So that will be something for us to look forward to. So tomorrow it's Up North at the Cabin by Marcia Wilson Chall, and the paintings are by Steve Johnson. So if you have that book, look it up, bring it along to Grandma Diane's story time, and you can read along with me. A Bad Case of the Stripes was today's story by David Shannon. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you tomorrow morning at 11. Bye now.